Hello, welcome to our Emmy Contender Chat at the Los Angeles Times. I'm Lorraine Ali, and I am television critic for the Los Angeles Times. And I am here with Wagner Moura, who's just come off 2 seasons of playing Pablo Escobar on Netflix Narcos. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So how often do you get the comment that you look very different from the...
That's a great compliment. I like it. I actually lost a lot of weight and then I regained it again. I mean, when I'm in Rio with my kids, I'm just eating things but I gained like 40 pounds to play Pablo.
Wow.
And I lost like 15 of those and I'm still working on it.
Wow.
But it's good when someone says that I don't look like him.
So did you, because you're doing him over 2 seasons, so what is that, like 3 years of...
It was like 2 years and more than that, because I had to arrive I arrived in Bogota, in Colombia, before everybody, even the crew. I mean, because when the director invited me to play this part, and by that time Netflix didn't even know I was being considered to play Pablo.
Wow.
It was a thing between the director and myself, and then I decided to go to Colombia to learn Spanish and to be there so I spent like 6 months living there alone before everybody else arrived.
Yeah.
So in total, I think that I spent almost 3 years, 2 years and a half or 2 years and 7 months or something.
Wow. And it's amazing that you learned Spanish for this.
Yeah.
It's not just like, okay, I had to get into this role, I had to, do some background on him. No, you actually had to learn another language.
Yeah.
That must have been daunting
Crazy.
going in.
Yeah. But at the same time, it was probably the most difficult thing I have ever done as an actor, because I had to learn a language in order to play a character. That was really, really hard. We
Right.
speak Portuguese in Brazil. I couldn't understand a little Spanish, but it's very different.
Right.
But at the same time, it was something that brought me in a very strong way into the character, because it was like I was thinking, I'm learning your language in order to play you. So I was very I started from the very basic ground.
Right.
So it made me. I dedicated a lot to it,
So, okay, so I'm taking it like born and raised in Brazil.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So, how much did you know about, Escobar and the Colombian cartel? Because this is happening like 80s, 90s. I know from our perspective in the U.S., we saw it as part of our drug war and all of that. Like, what was it like when you were growing up?
It was Brazil is kind of close to Colombia, and the drug trade is a big deal in Brazil as well in all South America, because we are the countries that produce and export drugs. Even though I didn't know much about Pablo, I remember the thing that I really remembered when I was a teenager. I remember the fat guy dad in the rooftop. Remember the image of him,
right.
dad,
Yeah.
and that was something that caught my attention. So when I was invited to play him, the first image that came to my mind was the image of him, dad. But I didn't know much about him, actually. And my trip to Colombia, all my adventure in Colombia was also, of course, learning the language and learning how to speak Spanish, which was, like I said, the basic part of it.
Yeah.
But I was also there studying, modern Colombian history. Colombia is a country. I had to understand the country in order to play that character, because Narcos is also a very political show.
Yeah.
In a way. So I couldn't. And Pablo Escobar was very involved into politics,
Yeah.
while he was alive. So yeah, I had to. I can say now that, and that was great for me, because one of the things that, for us Brazilians, one of the greatest things for me, when I was playing Narcos, was the feeling that to be part of something bigger than just being Brazilian. Brazil is a country that we don't feel that we are part of South America because we speak Portuguese. We're this big country that we consume our own culture. So being there and talking about the drug trade, which is something that resonates a lot with my daily life in Brazil, and just in working with actors from Chile, Colombia, Argentina, Mexico, I felt for the first time that I was part of something, of a culture that was actually bigger than being Brazilian, and that was really great for me.
Right,
it was a great part of it.
I mean, that's what was so interesting about watching him. Which, by the way, the portrayal you did of him was just fantastic.
Thank
because you. Here's this man that is known. There's a lot of like dual images of him. Depending on in Colombia, like where you were. Mm-hmm. Some people viewed him as a hero. Ultimately, others as a villain, vicious yet empathetic towards some of his own people. You went into that role and brought an empathy to this character that, I don't think many people could have done that. Mm. And I just wonder for you going into it, like how much background on him did you look at, or was it just sort of like you were formulating this in your head? Okay, like I'm a father, I know what it's like to have kids. This man had kids, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was because I felt that I had to. I think that I have basically read everything that was written about Pablo Escobar, both in Spanish and in English. So I and like I said about Colombian history, and so I observed a lot of that in order to forget all that and to create my own version of Pablo Escobar. If you know what I mean? I mean, I didn't try to imitate him but I knew so much about him because in the end of the day, that's what actors do. I think that all of us, even when you play a character that really existed, it's your version of him. If another actor when Javier Bardem is going to play Pablo Escobar in a film right now, and I'm crazy to see his version of him.
Wow. Because
he's such a great actor, and it's going to be different. It's like, I don't want to compare Pablo Escobar with Hamlet, but it's the same. When I played Hamlet once, and I love to see other versions of Hamlet, because it's each actor is going to bring something different to it. And so, for example, I tried all the time to make connections between my own life and the fact that I was away from my family and he was always running, and I have children that I wasn't seeing them all the time. So those were things that I brought to my personal experience.
Right. And because you're shooting this in Colombia, and as you're saying, with Pablo and with the whole cartel at that time, it was so much more than just the drug trafficking. It was politics, it was law enforcement, it was government. What was the reaction of like the people there? Because everybody was affected if they had lived through that period in different ways. Were you getting, like, what was the reaction of people?
It is an open scar in Colombia. Bogota was the most dangerous city in the world 20 years ago. 25 years ago. And now Bogota is a very modern and city. They changed a lot. The way they rebuilt themselves it's amazing. Oh. So it's many people in there, they don't like the idea of being stereotyped as the country where the cocaine country, and I understand that. But at the same time, I personally feel that it's important to talk about our past, in order to understand the future. I like political films and I'm directing a film in Brazil now about a Brazilian guerrilla called Carlos Marighella, a guy who was a leader of the resistance in Brazil against the dictatorship, which is a subject that we avoid in Brazil, because the dictatorship was a bad thing in our history. But I feel that you have to bring those things. The drug trade is probably the biggest problem in our countries, in South American countries. I personally think that drugs should be legalized because it's proved that the war on drugs is a big flop, especially for us, countries that produce and export drugs, because that's where the war is taking place. That's where
the most bloodshed.
That's where poor people in poor neighborhoods are being killed in a war, and so I think that when you have a series like Narcos, when you can really understand how this all began. It brings this subject to the to our daily conversations,
Yeah.
So I think politically it's important. And Colombia was divided, I think. Many people didn't like it because it's a recent scar. Everybody knows someone who was killed.
Right, that's what I was wondering. Like the fallout of that.
And more than that, it's an American series talking about them.
Oh, right.
It's with a Brazilian guy playing Pablo. So it's not easy for them, though. For us, and that I tell you, like, our concern since the beginning was we never wanted Narcos to be a series about two American cool cops that go to a South American country to save people from a bad guy. We really wanted it to be as real as possible, and the DEA guys were real characters in it. The United States were involved in basically everything that happened in South America in the last century,
right?
Probably. So they are real characters, but they are not. The idea of good and bad and evil, and it's very, like you said. I mean, Pablo Escobar is for sure he's bad, but people could see him as a human being and as a father, as a complex person. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how we try to portray all the characters in the show.
Right, and that's a really interesting point, though, too, about like representation of this is an American series, and the concern that it was going to be viewed as like, here come these Americans in as the saviors, and it so didn't do that.
Yeah,
you
right.
know?
Yeah.
What I thought was really interesting too is that, whereas in Brazil you're a known actor, you are a known person, you not so much here, and I think with Narcos that's definitely changed.
Yeah.
But the whole cast, as you were saying, you've got people from all over Latin America, and that's really fascinating. What was it? Yeah, that must have been very cool working.
Oh, it was fascinating. It was really cool. Like I said, that was probably one of the best things for me, to work with actors from all those countries, and to feel the connections that we had as human beings, as South American people, Latin Americans. That was really important for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, just in terms of American television, American film, I'm sorry if this is a very generic question, but I mean, just in terms of influences that you had. Well, let me back up a second. Growing up, did you want to get into acting? Did you know this was like what you were going to do, or?
I'm a journalist. I graduated.
Wow.
I graduated. I went I worked, but I've been acting since I was 15. Like I was working in a newsroom in my hometown and doing theater at night. But that was always my thing. My passion was do something with creative. I don't know. It's
right. So then, in terms of American film or American TV, were there things that at that point were influencing you, or was it more like Brazilian?
I mean, of course. I mean, we have a big influence. American movies are part of our culture.
Right.
We grew up watching American films. For sure. So from Steven Spielberg to Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, all the great American masters of films are very well known.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that you had done. I'm just wondering, like, your path into Narcos, because you had done. Was it 2 Brazilian films? It was a series?
Yeah, I did this films called, it also directed by the same guy who directed Narcos, José Padilha.
Okay.
Both very political. Also, it was 2 films called Elite Squad, part 1 and 2. those were films that tried to understand how the police operated in Brazil. And because, again, talking about this war that takes place in the favelas of South American countries, there are two major actors, roles to understand this war: the police, the drug dealers, and the people who live in the favelas. Those are the people who are involved in this war. That's where people are dying from in this war. And Padilha at that time decided to make a film about the police, about one of these three. He wanted to make a documentary about him, but then the police would never go on camera and say, yeah, we are corrupt and we kill, we torture, and so he decided to make a feature films, and those films became very, very popular in Brazil because there was an immediate connection. People would see, and it's shot in a very documentarist way, like a dog with handheld cameras.
I'm going to say it wrong, so I'm not even going to try and fill in that.
With handheld cameras and a lot of improvising, and so people in Brazil had a very strong connection with that, a social and political connection with those films, and at the same time, they are pure entertainment, and that's a very balanced, difficult thing
It's tricky.
Tricky thing to do, and so these films were very, very popular in there. And also abroad, the Elite Squadron, we got a Golden Bear in Berlin with the first film, and became very well known even here in Hollywood.
Yeah, and you got the Golden Globe nomination for
Narcos.
Right, right. So interesting, because Narcos kind of works along that same prism of police. It's not favelas, but it's the people. In that last episode, and this is not a spoiler, because I'm assuming most of you know that
Not at all.
Escobar didn't make it out alive.
Yeah, didn't end well for him.
Yeah, right. I was just reading about that, the attention to detail in that last scene of him dying on that rooftop.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
It was really crazy because we actually shot that scene on the very same rooftop where Pablo was killed.
Wow.
So, and I spent, like I said, 2 years doing this character and working with those people and the crew and everybody. So we all knew that was the end of the road for that character. And the fact that it was shot, I fell at the very same place where Pablo was killed. So that was a very emotional day. I wouldn't know how to describe exactly what we felt that day, but something really, there was an energy around that scene. That was, and I liked the scene. I liked the way we shot it, and very well directed by Andy Baez, the Colombian director.
Yeah, there was something, this is going to sound weird to say, but there was something really beautiful and moving and tragic about it. But there was just this beauty to it, which I did not expect.
Yeah.
And it was there.
Yeah.
But also, for you, that's the end of Pablo on Narcos. And Narcos is going on, correct?
Yeah. They I think they just wrapped the third season, which is about the Cali cartel. The idea was always to make a series about the drug trade, and we knew that Pablo would last like 1 or 2 seasons. And in the first season, we followed 10 years of his life, I think. And the second one was like 1 year. It was really dynamic, really fast, and more. Second season was more. I think it was more dramatic. And the first season was more epic, in the sense that we were like really trying to explain how the drug trade worked. And in the second season, we were really focused on Pablo on the run and his emotional, the curve, when the curve starts to go
Yeah.
down. So we couldn't see the powerful guy anymore, which was very important for me as an actor, because I felt during the whole time that I was kind of making a big film, with because I knew how generally actors, when they're doing television, they don't know how their character is gonna end.
Right.
And I knew exactly what was gonna happen to my character, so I could build this arc, this curve. So the second season was very important for me, for all of us. And but they are gonna move on. So I think it's now Cali, which is very interesting as well. It's the Cali cartel. They were really different from Medellin, sophisticated drug dealers. So like I said, for us, I think for everybody, because the drug trade is a big deal all around the world, but it resonates a lot for me as a Latin American man to understand how this thing happened, how it began, how the different shades of layers and kinds of people who made this thing the way it is today. You see Mexico now, for example, how crazy it is. The cartels in there,
and I mean, you brought this up a little bit earlier, but like the responsibility of it too, because sort of the stereotyping and the idea of, I mean, with that comes a great responsibility in playing Escobar. I don't know, because, in terms of Brazil, we had talked about this too. People asking you, oh, the Olympics. Did you go to the Olympics now? And you're saying, at least that's a positive way of people thinking of Brazil now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, with playing Escobar, did you feel a great responsibility in a way not to play into those?
I tried not to think about it.
Yeah.
But I knew all the time that it was a big deal. It was the history of Colombia is divided in before and after Pablo. He was a horrible person. He was a very the amount of people who were killed when he was alive is just crazy. But again, I think I always believed that it was important to tell that story, to make people, kind of know, or not even there in Colombia, where people basically are aware of everything. But Netflix is all around the world, and I think it's
and we have actually questions from some viewers. So here's from Rebecca. What was it like living with an extra 40 pounds and that mustache, which, Rebecca, the mustache is still there for 2 seasons?
40 pounds were really hard. Really hard. In the beginning, it was great because I was just eating delicious thing, and I could say it's just work. I'm doing this professionally. I'm doing this for work. But at the end of the day, my body, and I couldn't. My body is I'm still chubby. I mean, I wrapped like I don't know. I wrapped like a year ago, and I still trying to go back to my former weight, which is really hard. It's easy to gain weight. It's really hard to lose them. And I felt.
I don't know anything about that. It's
no, no.
Girl in LA.
But I felt, and I felt that wasn't my body. That wasn't my body. So I felt like with a lot of lack of energy, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't healthy at all. All my the blood texts were all like crazy.
Wow.
So no, I would never do this again.
But it's like, in a way, and I think you said this is like shedding Escobar in a way. So you're like shedding the pounds.
So so when I rapped, I did this diet, this vegan thing.
Yeah.
Not only to lose weight, but also to get rid of his. So I managed to lose a lot of weight. I gained it again, a little bit, but that was really important to get rid of that.
Yeah.
More than getting rid of the weight was getting rid of the energy of that character, which wasn't cool at all.
So, okay, we have another question from Rodrigo. Now that Pablo is out of the picture, will you be involved with the show behind the cameras? Any chance for flashbacks?
No, I don't think so. No, no. I would love to, you know, maybe at some point, like in the season 5, to come back as another character. A thinny,
An emaciated character.
a guy with a great body and very sexy and but
Clean shaven.
yeah, 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 totally clean. But no flashbacks. No, I'm done with Pablo. You know.
Right. And you said you were directing. I'm sorry, a film.
Yeah.
Are you acting in it at all, or you're
No,
directing
I'm
it?
just directing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it also sounds like intense subject matter. Have you thought now just also to do some light role at this point? Like you have these heavy duty.
I'd love to. You know what? One thing that especially after doing Pablo, I have this. I was in a South by Southwest talking about in a panel about stereotypes and how Latins are portrayed in films. And my goal is to produce content, to produce films where Latin people are not seen the way they are usually seen. You know, or sexy Latin women, or drug dealers, or violent things. I have this project about this Brazilian UN guy called Sergio Vieira de Mello, who was a very important guy in the UN. He was supposed to be the next Secretary General. He was killed in Iraq when they attacked the UN headquarters in Iraq. So I'm trying. My goal now is to produce things where Latins are seen, you know, with different models of Latin. I think that representation matters, and I'm into doing this.
And I wanted to ask you a couple of these little flash questions we asked towards the end of these interviews. What was the last show you binge watched aside from Narcos?
I binge watched Stranger Things, and I forgot what's it. Dear White People.
Oh, good.
On Netflix. That's a great show.
Yeah, both really excellent shows. What show that you love would you want to sit and watch? Wait. What show that you love would you want to sit and watch someone else enjoy for the first time? That's a really oddly worded question.
Yeah, I didn't get it.
Yeah, no, you know what? Let's just skip that one. I didn't write that question. I just want you to know. If you could go back and be on any classic show, what would it be?
Listen, I would love to be part of Saturday Night Live.
Saturday Night Live?
At some point, I mean, that would be, but it's not. It's already a classic for me, though it's a new show. House of Cards is. I think it's a great show.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, maybe SNL you can do the Comey role. We never know what's
Yeah,
coming
yeah,
next.
I'd love to.
Well,
I can be funny.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for
It was a
being
pleasure.
here. It was really fun.
Thanks for talking to me.
And thank you for tuning in. And you can see more of these chats on latimes.com. Thank you.